As you know, a project like the Pegasus Farm in programming is never static. It's always dynamic and evolving, and so I'm happy to share. Back in 1974, three ladies doing dressage riding and pleasure riding at one of the, which would become the original chapter for the Pegasus Therapeutic Riding. It's Oxbridge Hunt Club in Darien, Connecticut. The ladies loved their riding, their time together, and were very fascinated by learning more about dressage. So they made a trip to Europe, and in particular saw numerous examples of good dressage and competition in Germany. They came home full of ideas, full of enthusiasm, and full of excitement. As the conversations went about, they said, this is something that we should all be investigating. So consequently, they found an instructor, they found a site, they found volunteers. So they had the basic components to starting, but they didn't have a client. At that point, I was beginning my teaching career at a rehabilitation center and had access to people that might be interested. So that was how I first learned about Pegasus and guided their first clients to them. As you can imagine, over time, things have changed and stayed the same. You've heard the expression that the outside of a horse is great for the innards of man. And that's still true, whether it's 1974 or today in 2019. But as you know, there'll always be challenges back under the chapter system because you didn't have regular interactions with others. It was determining what was the best use of that particular barn that you were working with, or the particular horse that they might have available to you to use, etc., and how you could build into their settings. That sometimes was a challenge just because of the nature of moving pieces, but it didn't daunt anybody's spirits. We learned as much as we could. We attended workshops, we talked together, we met others, and so we were growing and learning. And as we grew and learned over time, my goodness, there was a chapter that had an owner and a lovely horse that was very good for vaulting kinds of activities. And she had a population nearby that she could turn to that were middle school aged children who might have some sensory issues, they might have some motor planning issues, strength issues, etc. And those things could be worked into the activities they did, but they were excited because they were doing things that, 13-year-old children could or could not be doing. This was special for them. As we went along, we eventually were guests of Judy Richter and Coker Farm to have an annual horse show. So then we could bring the people from the different chapters together and have fun having picnics on the hillside, watching the competitions, getting families together, siblings together, and it became the first part of, okay, we want to include those aspects into anything that we're doing, exploring around. Well, it's not so easy to find the right size barn, to know how to manage it, to know how to find your horses, etc., etc. So you ask about a challenge? That was the beginnings of a challenge. And there was much going back and forth over the how-tos. Do we have the staff we need? The therapist involved? Do we have the clientele that we want to reach out to in this place or that place? As well as we want to expand our program. We want to do have other options, etc. So it was very fortunate that at one point in time, as you look around at this facility, this property, you take a big, deep breath. And we were very lucky. It was a long search, but when we did, it was a friend, Dr. Bradley, who helped us to make this dream come true. And thus we started. And that brings new challenges, because if you're not used to running a barn or, maintaining a barn and keeping it viable for itself, let alone for your program, we had lots to learn. But indeed, with a smile and energy and supporting each other, we've done that. To go back for a moment in time, when we were talking about the first chapter and its coming together, at that point in time, 1975, we had bartered for our ring time with establishments that said, on such and such a day, our barn is closed. If we have a horse that fits your needs, you may work with it on that day that you have programmed. You start small. So initially we worked with, in that particular chapter, one horse, and a short time, the following year, I think we added 2 horses. So we went out of people's school strings, which are usually sensible horses, grounded horses, and already, because they've been teaching, they're going to be able to accommodate this second job. But and very often we got some of those horses too for the program at one point because of their previous experiences, but they were getting older or didn't have this flexibility anymore to do the job that they were being asked to do. So now they were ready for a second career, and that's when we picked up some of these horses for ourselves. And I had the privilege of being on the periphery when the program started, and I also happened to live across the street with a big field. So as the horses were retired, I could claim them for Pegasus and let them live out their time, because they would work in a much different way that was easier for them to accommodate, but we needed the skills they had honed over a lifetime. Calmness, dependability, secureness. But at the same time, they had maintained their balance or their conformational points that make them good, so that you're not going to be putting a rider on that gets, oh my goodness, what is this? I have no clue. You want them to have the most normal and good conformation and skills, movement skills, as they can, so that that's what they're going to transmit to an individual who has motor challenges. And back then, that was a lot of our clientele, was a variety of motor challenges. But as you go along, horse shows change in the world, barns change, the way they approach them, how they teach them, the creature that they're looking for to now fulfill their need, it changes. So you're constantly evolving. So again, you're still looking at, well, is this a horse that we can utilize this way, that way? And so we have a process. We have a process to go out and be introduced to them, to see how they work, try them ourselves, etc., and see where we're at, and then make a plan. Today, as a business, we're very much have worked through many of these procedures and processes and filed them so that we have more of a blueprint, if you will, that says how we're going to introduce a horse, what are we going to look for, how are we going to assess it, then we'll have a trial period, etc., and see what we think. So that work to what we need and then have them for longer. It's a nice hope, but it's always a variable.
So let me ask you about, let's move forward to, why did you seek out PATH accreditation? How does that assist or help or truly benefit what you're doing here?